our tendency is always to try. Our life is not enough. We try to be someone different. We try not to be trapped in our identity. And I think that in a way, being a novelist, or even not a novelist, a writer, is exploring these virtualities of our lives. But we all have this feeling that there are in our lives some kind of key moments where, you know, you are at the crossing of the roads, and you can go one way or you can go the other way. And if you go one way, you will never know what will have happened if you had gone the other way. So you don't know what is better. What I think I completely lost, and I don't feel it like a great loss, is the belief, or the desire of belief, to the Catholic dogma. And you know, I wanted at a moment to be a very devout Catholic. This, I feel very far from it. But as long as you know, as went far from this, you know, dogmatic Catholicism, I think I got maybe a bit closer to the gospel itself. So honestly, I think you don't need to believe in God. I don't know what it means, believe in God, but you don't really need to believe in God to be very, you know, for the gospel, for you to be a very close companion who is with you for maybe for the end of your life. And you know, I still think that the words of Christ are maybe with some other great text, maybe with Lao Tzu, with something like that, but it's still completely alive and nourishing and nurturing for me. And sometimes, in fact, I think I have the feeling to be maybe a better Christian by not being a Catholic anymore.
Dear all, welcome to the next meeting from a year-long series of events titled The Nature of the Future. My name is Grzegorz Jankowicz and I work as program director of the Conrad Festival. These conversations, which we present on the last Thursday of each month, are aimed at broadening and the perspectives and context of this year's edition of Conrad. My guest today is Emmanuelem Carrèrem. Hello, Emmanuel.
Hello.
Emmanuelem Carrèrem is a French novelist, biographer, journalist and filmmaker, author of many books, mostly non-fiction, of which 8 or even 9, if I count correctly, were translated into Polish. The last one, Yoga, premiered in Poland a couple of weeks ago. Emmanuel, thank you for accepting my invitation. Good to have you as a guest of Conrad.
Well, thank you for your invitation.
I would like to talk with you about your writing. Of course, the writing which on the one hand is very diverse and rich, and on the other is about the same, about the fight against the ego, the stake of which is the liberation from self. This unending process of breaking free from the chains of the ego takes a form of unique spiritual work. It looks to me as a continuous spiritual effort that you make with the help of literature. But let's start with your books, with your stories. In Kingdom, you write about your conversation with a psychotherapist who told you that the pattern of the entire analytical process is usually revealed at the beginning. Is it possible to say in a similar way that the pattern of your work has already appeared in your novel The Moustache, a work that owes something to the stories by Richard Matheson? I know it's not your debut, but it seems to me that with this book, written very early in your career, you started to write about your favorite themes.
Well, in fact, The Moustache was not my first, but my third book. But fortunately, you haven't read the two first ones, which were, you know, very young man's attempts to write something like literature. I would also say, before answering this, that I am very impressed and seduced by what you say about my work. But I think if it's some kind of spiritual quest or attempt to free oneself of the chains of ego, it's not very successful. It's a sincere attempt. It's sincere efforts, but quite fruitless. But well, the books are, as you say, mainly about that. So this book, The Moustache, well, it's very far from me. It's more like a long short story, what the Americans call a novella, than a novel. And it's also some kind of a horror story. So it's a bit, I changed later quite a lot my way of writing. So I am not sure that all what I did was already in this book. Even I think it's not bad. It's a bit frightening, but I feel quite far from it. Even if, in fact, I directed a film which was based on it about 15 years ago, which was called La Moustache, with actors Vincent Lindon and Emmanuel Devos. And well, if I did that, it means that that book was not that far from me, as I say. But maybe also making this film had the results that the book, faded out of my field of consciousness.
Let me explain why I thought that the pattern is already there.
Please do.
On the second page of this novel, a nameless character shaves in a bathtub. He does shavings twice a day, but the evening process is more important. When his wife complains about this ceremony, the protagonist replies that it is his way of meditation, his Zen practice, an exercise aimed at getting to know himself and the spiritual world. However, it is clear from the outset that his ritual aims to cultivate a particular self-image. He's obsessed with his image, with his ego. In this case, spiritual exercise comes down to a narcissistic self-enthusiasm. And of course, if this is all about ego, there is no spiritual experience at all. It seemed to me that you are interested in this mistake, the mistake in which narcissism is taken as a spiritual experience, so much that you come back to it in each of your books, presenting it with an example of fictional or real characters, as well as with the example of yourself.
Ah, you are a very, very attentive reader. You know more about this book than I remember myself. Well, in fact, when the nameless character of this book, when he says that to his wife, it's joking. It's joking because, you know, he is very, very far of every kind of spiritual quest or meditation, as I was at that time. You know, as I was. For me, it was something completely exotic, and in fact, I almost didn't know what was meditation. I think for me, it was, you know, that something like Hare Krishna or something, well, a bit caricatural. So the character shared my ignorance and my ignorant irony. But sure, you're right. There is something where he is in the obsession he has with his appearance, and the fact that this appearance is, which is, you know, what his identity, that it's completely destroyed. It disappears completely, and that's very completely. It drives him in a way mad. Also, the book is the twist of the trick of the book is that you can't know if he is mind or if the world is getting mad around him. If everything, if he's either he is mad or there is only one he who is not mad, which is one of the definitions of paranoia.
Your text, titled "In Search of the Diceman," is a glimpse into the life of George Cockcroft, aka Luke Reinhardt, author of famous book "The Diceman" from 1971. In the article, you write that many of your books have revolved around the possibility of multi-faced life. We are trapped in our little person, locked in our ways of thinking and acting, so we dream about being someone else. We dream about living differently. You became a writer to imagine such things. These are your words. But your friend, to whom you refer in this text, contrasts your desire with the Stoic tradition, for which the most important thing is to limit oneself and choose only one path. You wrote that with age, you lean towards the latter concept. But is it really possible to stay on one path? Is it really possible to give up this desire to be someone else after we come to the conclusion that oneself is not enough?
You know, it's like a harmony or serenity or things like that. I don't know if it's possible, but you can try. And trying is what you can call, a spiritual life. You know, it's not to maybe, sure, there are some people who reach this goal. They are called saints or it's called wisdom. But for most of us, and I include me, sure, into this, it can only be an attempt. But this, I am. You get to a very important point. This possibility. We are. Our tendency is always to try. Our life is not enough. We try to be someone different. We try not to be trapped in our identity. And I think that, in a way, being a novelist, or even not a novelist, a writer, is exploring these virtualities of our lives. But sure, I think that if we try to approach some kind of wisdom or spiritual accomplishments, it means to free oneself of this temptation of the kaleidoscopic life.
In the novel, The Diceman, Luke Reinhardt puts his life under control of the dice. Instead of one road, he has many different paths and many different choices. He can be many different characters. He can live many different lives. However, George Cockcroft seemed to be a calm, cheerful, and straightforward man. He was the opposite of Reinhardt. At least that's how he presented himself to you. Don't you think that his subsequent novels, subsequent books, and he wrote 10 of them in total, were not good precisely because he did not have this desire to be someone else, to look for other roads, other paths?
Well, it's a bit sad to say that they are not good because he was such a nice man that well, they were not as good and as you know, impressive than is the Dice Man. That's true. You know, that it belongs to the category of these writers who have written one extraordinary book, and one extraordinary book in a writer's life is enough. You know, there are some of these writers, you know, Juan Rulfo, who have written Pedro Paramo, and Pedro Paramo, well, it's enough for a life of a writer. Yes, I think what you say can be true. If I can, the book I wrote next to the Moustache, which you certainly haven't read because I'm sure he was not translated into Polish, and if he was not translated, it was because it was not good. But on this, referring to this topic, it's interesting because it's a book about a young woman who is not satisfied with her life because she had this feeling to be completely trapped in determinism, in social, cultural determinism. She has the feeling, well, that even when she chose the name, the first name for her child, she discovers that it's exactly the first name that is statistically given to children of this age, this social class. Well, and all is like this. She has the feeling that he is defined not by her some kind of personal identity, but something that is social, cultural, historical determinism. And we can try to escape this by, some kind of effort to, there is a beauty, this expression that I like, which is thinking out of the box. We can try to think out of the box, but it's not her solution. Her solution that she discovers purely by chance. She goes to a casino. She plays just like this, like a tourist in a casino with friends, just to spend an evening having fun, playing at the roulette. And she discovers that, and in fact, she is completely catched by the roulette, and she discovers that in a way all the decisions of her life are taken by the roulette. You see what I mean? You understand?
Yes, of course. It's very similar.
It's very similar to the book, which I didn't know at that time. But she, or maybe in fact that I knew it. Maybe I knew it. If I think about, I think I have read it very early. This book I think in my early 20s or something like that. No, maybe I knew it, but I think I never thought about the dice. And the book is very different from in its tone or it's quite sad and gloomy book. But there is this temptation not to rely on chains of something that is exterior to her, and not to have to decide anything anymore. And I did use at the moment, it's different because it's more poetic and creative, but I used the I Ching quite a lot in this. I began to use the I Ching very early, and I used it even more when I wrote the biography of Philip K. Dick. And Philip K. Dick was a very assiduous user of the I Ching. He wrote a book with the help of the I Ching, which is The Man of the High Castle. And I myself, wrote my book about Dick using the I Ching. When I had a problem in the book, well, I asked the I Ching to resolve the problem.
I will ask you about this marvelous biography later. Let me ask a few more questions before we move to Philippe K. Dick. In the books about Jean-Claude Roman and Edward Limonov, different from a certain point of view and yet similar to each other, you describe a moment when the life of your character split, when something changed in him and led him in a different direction. In the case of Roman, this other direction was a hoax that lasted nearly 20 years and then multiply murders. And in the case of Limonov, there were actually 10 other directions. He led 10 different lives, as you wrote. You've spent a lot of time analyzing this breakthrough point, this point when life splits. What is the cause of this split? Is it something different each time, or is there a common denominator?
Well, I think we all have this feeling that there are in our lives some kind of key moments where, you know, you are at the crossing of the roads, and you can go one way or you can go the other way. And if you go one way, you will never know what would have happened if you had gone the other way. So you don't know what is better. But in the case of Jean-Claude Roman, it's very, very peculiar and an extreme experience, because there is a moment where he chooses very in a very absurd way, and a very you know, you can't expect anything of doing this. He chooses lying on the basis of a very small thing. You know, he didn't go to pass an exam, and instead of saying, well, I didn't go, I can pass it again or something, or you know, going to see the rector or these teachers, say, well, we can correct this, we can go. He says that he succeeded to the exam, and from there, his life goes into a way which is the way of lie, and he lies for about 20 years. He says that everything, he has some kind of imaginary life, which is his official life, which is the life to which believe his wife, his parents, his children, his friends, whom at the end, at least for his wife and parents and children, he ends killing, because he can't admit the idea that they know the truth about him. So it's a very extreme way of you know, going one's way and choosing a way which in fact is obviously the bad one. And what is strange is that he didn't know that he was not more aware that it was so obviously a bad way which could drive him nowhere, or to the worst possible place. In the case of Limonov, it's completely different, because it's out of this permanent changes and you know, turns out in his life were out of great vitality and capacity of you know, on every occasion to take the opportunity to go somewhere somewhere else, to experiment something else. He was a guy who was obsessed by the idea of living as many experience than you can live in a man's life. So some of these experiences were quite how to say, you one doesn't approve them. But there is in him, which I admire, this great vitality and courage and imagination also. He had the idea of there was the idea of both living as many experiences as possible, but also to build one personality, one identity, which is extremely narcissistic, egotist, but at least he had the courage and the imagination to live these lives.
Emmanuel, what is the reason you happen to observe court hearings and people who have committed crimes? Why do you pay so much attention to such cases? You wrote articles about it, you wrote this book about Romain. What are you interested in when you write about such cases?
In fact, if I can say this, I am currently attending the huge trial of the terrorist attacks in Paris in 2015, which were on the 13th of November, which was there was 130 dead, and it was I think it was the strongest terrorist attack in France. But this trial is going to last 9 months, and I am attending it every day and writing every week a column in a French weekly and about that. And well, I guess it will end with a book. I can't know that because it's the beginning of the process, but it's so that's a confirmation of what you say, which is this interest for crime, for criminal trials. Well, I think it's something I have in common with a lot of writers or novelists, because this is an extreme expression of humanity, but it's a really fascinating expression of humanity. What expresses of humanity, crime, so I have done it quite a lot. I've been attending trials. I've been, but I think the question can be reversed. It's I don't understand how you can't be interested in that. And there is also one thing is that the trial is an extraordinary. It's like theater. It's like dramaturgy. You spend a certain number of days or weeks, or in this case months. You always with the same people, is in the same room, everyone trying to build a truth, and it's an extraordinary experience. For instance, all the journalists who are writing about this, all of them are completely. They will never change their job for any other one. It's completely fascinating. It's addictive also.
In Kingdom, you present your religious experience, which has become the focus of your life for a few years, for 3 years. You write about it from the perspective of a man who has largely gone through it and now is agnostic. Reading this book, I had the impression that you are deliberately and effectively trying to say two mutually exclusive things: that your religious experience was an illusion, and at the same time, it was not. Would you agree with this?
Yes, and I think that in the book, I was not, and I don't know why, in fact, I was not explicit enough about it, because some people asked me after that, well, but you say that you have, what happened when, after these 3 years before, how did you lose your faith? And I thought that I should have said a little more about that, because in fact, there was not a moment where I said, well, okay, all this was bullshit. I don't believe anymore what I had believed. No, there was some kind of gradual, it was less and less central and important in my life, sure. But I think that, and the book is also about that, the book is not about conversion to atheism. What I say is not, I am not enough a believer to be an atheist. But what I think I completely lost, and I don't feel it like a great loss, is the belief or the desire of belief to the Catholic dogma. I wanted at a moment to be a very devout Catholic. This, I feel very far from it. But as long as went far from this, dogmatic Catholicism, I think I got maybe a bit closer to the gospel itself. Honestly, I think you don't need to believe in God. I don't know what it means, believe in God, but you don't really need to believe in God to be very, for the gospel, for you to be a very close companion who is with you for maybe for the end of your life. And I still think that the words of Christ are maybe with some other great text, maybe with Lao Tzu, with something like that, but it's still completely alive and nourishing and nurturing for me. And sometimes, in fact, I think I have the feeling to be maybe a better Christian by not being a Catholic anymore. It's I am aware that it may be to say that to a Polish audience, which is is very attached to Catholicism, may be a bit shocking. But I really have this feeling that you really can read the Gospels without believing in God.
I'm sure that in Poland you will find people who are very attached to the Christianity and Catholicism, and others who are completely detached from this tradition. So
maybe
some of them
would agree with what I say. At least what I can say is that I never went far from the Gospels. It means I am not, I am not good at all. I am a bad man. But this still is the great reference for me.
I have an intuition that I want to share with you and ask you to comment on it. It seems to me that every writer who analyzes his or her inner life, who writes about the world from the perspective of his or her inner experiences, is one way or another indebted to Christianity and the invention of conscience. Alison Bechdel, with whom I spoke last month, gave me this idea. I asked her why she has such a strong need to talk about private experiences, the need to share with others intimate details about her life and the lives of her relatives. And she replied,
I agree.
Ironically, but there was also a note of seriousness in it, that she had been brought up in a Catholic family and had always enjoyed the ritual of confession. Later, she took this practice and modified it, and today she uses it to talk about what hurts her, what is part of her emotional struggles. The first book of this kind in Western culture was Confessions of
By
Saint
Augustine.
Augustine. Yeah. So do you
sure.
see your affinities with this tradition?
I agree completely with this, completely. Well, the fact that this, I agree with the fact that this tradition begins with Augustine, which I have read quite a lot, who is, for me, an immense writer. But there is something extraordinary in Augustine, that I'm very interested in the different, I don't know if I say it well, but in the different grammatical persons you can write. If you write in the third person, in the first person, if you write in the second person, or in the third. Usually, the choice is between the first and the third. Book that I wrote about what is called the New Testament, the Kingdom, is, you know, the entrance of the book is the moment where in the Acts of the Apostles there is a very discreet, furtive apparition of the first person in the middle of a book, which is the Acts of the Apostle, which is written on the third person. But there, I think, the great example, and there are very few examples in the Western literature, of writing in the second person, which is the case, which is what happens in the Confessions of Augustine. And strangely enough, he reaches some kind of extraordinary spiritual objectivity by putting this under the gaze, under the of God, to whom he talks, to whom he addresses the book. And this is, I think, there is no other example and it's extraordinary.
You also mention Montaigne as a writer, important for those who want to write about everything that comes to their minds. What was Montaigne's aim when he started his project?
Well, I think at the beginning, Montaigne's aim was to write one of these books that retired gentlemen farmers write when they are, you know, when they have been busy and they are retired, and they have read quite a lot, especially of antiques, of the writers of the antiquity, and who write about their opinions, things like that, which was something relatively common. That when there was a moment where he discovered that what he was writing, what was very peculiar about him, was something about humanity, was something that his very peculiar experience was absolutely interesting in itself, because it's common to all humanity. And that's why Montaigne is so both fascinating and friendly, and we can when you begin to write, to read him, he becomes a friend. He becomes one of your best friends. You know that there is no solemnity, no obligations with him. You don't have to read him one chapter after chapter. You can open the book and you spend a couple of hours with him, who is chatting about and you know that what he says, which is him with all his peculiarities, it deals with what is common to all of us. That's, I think Montaigne is a unique writer, and is certainly the most hospitable and friendly, and there is also something which is more wonderful in Montaigne, which makes him a very far from you know, if not Christianity, at least Christianity. He's completely, there is no guilt for him. He is not at all, there is no culpability. He said, well, I am like that. It means being human. I am not perfect. I have very, by some ways, under certain angles, I'm quite a bad man. I'm very, and not only because I am lazy, but he never feels guilty. And it's also incredibly refreshing. It helps you in life to have from as a companion this guy who is always, well, okay, it's like that. Don't worry. It's enough to worry because life is difficult, because you have to die, because people you love die, but don't add to this culpability. It's okay like that. It's enough.
I promise to move to Philip K. Dick, with whom you certainly have an affinity, and to whom you devoted an excellent book. I don't know why this biography has not yet been published in Polish. This is one of the best books on this American writer, Dostoevsky of our times, as you like to say. I noticed that in the book about him and in Kingdom, you used almost the same words, the same phrases for him and for yourself, describing difficult periods in your lives. In the introduction to this biography, you say that your aim is to present the close relationship between Dick's life and his work. In your opinion, there is a direct relationship between these spheres, which may be surprising, since Dick's fantastic writing appears to be the work of pure imagination. So what is the nature of this relationship between life and work in his case?
Yes, that was the idea of the book. It was to consider that these books, these novels, which are supposed to be pure imaginations, which takes place in far planets with robots and with aliens, and to think that it was an autobiography. And when I began to do this, I wrote some kind of 2 columns with the facts of his life and the plots of the books, and it worked. And it was really fun to see how much it worked. And I love to do that. I love those. In fact, there is also a problem. I've always been an admirer of Dick. From my, from as a teenager, I began to read him. I think 17, 18, something like that. But when you write a biography, there is always a risk that the hero of the biography, you are fed up with him. You can't stand him. You don't like him anymore. And I never stopped liking him. It's even if he was an unbearable guy, there is something so sincere and childish with him that I always loved him. But I discovered a lot about Dick and what later when I wrote the Kingdom, and because he was quite close to Saint Paul. The difference is that Saint Paul was lucky enough to found a religion, which Dick tried, but he failed. But that was, in fact, the same kind of characters, both extraordinarily a genius, a paranoiac, someone who made, who gave some kind of verisimilitude to things that, if you think about it, are completely crazy. It can't be considered differently as something completely crazy. Dick stayed on the side of literature, which he was sad of. I think he would have liked to people to believe him, because he was absolutely convinced that he was telling, with some disguise, things like fictional disguise, that he was telling a very important and a known truth about the world. And so I really think there was something in common in the psychological profiles of Dick and Paul.
The last mystical period of Dick's life and work is particularly interesting in this context. The literature he has writing at that time put you off first and then became intriguing when you yourself experience religious, how to call it, awakening. How do you relate to those Dick's novels today?
The last Dick's novels, I am fascinated by them. I am fascinated by them. First, I think that's what people, even among Dick's admirers, are not aware of. I think they are very good novels also. They are among his best. The difference being that he believed in them. But well, he had in the last year of his life something that he considered that might be a mystical experience, but he was himself dubious about that. He doubted about it. There was one day a part of him considered that he was some kind of prophet. Someone who was really telling an unknown and an invisible truth about the world, but that it was not like the truth of a novel. That was the truth people should understand and believe. So part of it, him thought he was well, let's say like Paul. And the other part said, well, I'm an old and exhausted hippie who took too much drugs, and I am a paranoiac. That's very rare that someone that says I am a paranoiac. A paranoiac never has the idea that he is a paranoiac. And Dick, who was something very, very peculiar, he had this idea. So that makes the book, the last books of Dick, an incredibly fascinating movement between, between these two, how to say it, there's two possibilities. Either I am a prophet or I am a paranoiac. And it's this doubt and the fact that also he had a lot of humor, which is also, it never exists with paranoiac. In principle, it's a total contradiction to be a paranoiac and to have humor. And he had both. That's, I think, on a psychiatric level, Dick is one of the most fascinating characters that ever existed.
How to understand the fact that two French writers of the same generation, you and Michel Houellebecq, wrote books about American writers of fantasy and science fiction. You about Dick and Houellebecq about Lovecraft that Dick read and was fascinated by. Is it a coincidence or a part of a certain generation experience?
And also, I love Lovecraft. He was among the one of the writers who, even if I became a writer, I read Lovecraft long before I read Dick. I read Lovecraft when I was, I think, 13 or something like that, and it was for my life. It was of the greatest experience that I ever had. And the Houellebecq's book is wonderful. I don't know if it's what I can say is that we have, Houellebecq and I, this in common, and that in fact it was not very common at our generation. I think a lot of people of our age were more prone to some kind of very of literature that looked like literature. What was very tried to be very well written. That was still the last the tale of the nouveau roman, things like that. To which I am completely alien. and I think Welbeck also. So this fascination when we were young for that kind of literature, I think that's something we share, and that was not very much shared at that time.
Emmanuel, how do you define the line between fiction and non-fiction?
Well, it's easy to define it when it comes to movies. When you know with the difference between a fiction film and a documentary film. The difference is that in a fiction film there are actors, even if they play the roles of real people, but they are actors. And in a documentary, they are not actors; they are the real people you are dealing with. Maybe there are some exceptions to this, but I think this frontier is pretty clear. In literature, it's more difficult. I think also in this difference is something very this frontier seems to be something very important in the Anglo-Saxon world. I mean, you know, the books, if you are fiction or non-fiction, you are not on the same shelves in bookshops. It's since my books, which are non-fiction, they are sold in bookshops, in French bookshops, on the same place as novels, even if they are not, strictly speaking, novels. You know, I think my books, they are completely written like novels. They use all the, you know, the means, the tricks of a novel, but they use some real material. What makes the difference? Because, you know, all is not, I mean, it's not that all is not true, but it's a reality that is edited. You know, there are things that are, that I cut, that I add, it's not, you know, it's not like giving the rushes of all the film. It's quite a hardware of editing, which makes it in a way like fiction. In a way, it seems to be a very anecdotal criterion, but I believe in it. It's if you use the real names. If you use the real names, you are not, the book have not the same status. It means that, for instance, there are, you know, some kind of responsibility and even a legal responsibility. People can sue you if they don't agree or this with what you say about them. So I think that seems to be a very small criterion, but I don't know one which will be better. I say that things are true in my books, even if in yoga, for different reasons, different personal reasons, I say that some things are, if not untrue, at least very, I can't say all is true, as I said in the other books, even if, you know, it's true that 95%. But, well, I think it's a possible criterion.
In yoga, you write that you never make up stories about yourself, that everything you wrote about yourself is true. If someone brought you before a tribunal of angels, you would easily defend yourself. These are almost your words from this book. Writing about others is different. In this case, you are forced to change things because you are talking about another person. This is a kind of...
Or even you can say at the plural of other persons.
Of course. This is a kind of pact between you as a writer and the reader. You didn't have to write this, that everything you wrote about yourself is true. But once the assurance has been made, the reader has a right to become attached to it. The moment this truthfulness is questioned, your relationship with the reader can get complicated. How do you see this situation?
Well, I agree with this. I agree with this. And, you know, as I said, as you say, nobody asked me but I really, you know, I've written, in fact, I have written only 2 autobiographical books, strictly speaking, which was another, which was a Russian novel, and this one. In the other books, in the other of my last books, I appear not as, you know, as certainly not as the protagonist, but as a narrator, as the author of the book who says. So basically, what I say, that's the only thing. I'm not as much an autobiographer as people say. All my books are not autobiography. I appear in them, but it's not. So basically, all I say about me, what I mean, it's never difficult. When you talk about yourself, in fact, there is no problem. Even if you say things that are not flattering, things that are not honorable, you say what you agree to say. It depends completely on you. That's why I say, well, okay. But when it comes to other people, well, you have to, and that's what happened in this book, and that's why in this book I say this. I didn't feel this contract completely because it deals with other people, and I had to change some things. It's not a lot. It's not a lot, but it is, and I say that as a regret. I say that, well, I would have liked to be more explicit, more precise, more, and I can't. Well, okay, I agree for this, but it makes the book a little, how to say, when you have, you know, one leg which is shorter or longer than the other one, you know, it makes it's a bit crippled.
While preparing for this conversation, I found on my shelves Men's Fate by André Malraux. I read this novel in the past, and now I reread the last pages, on which, as you may remember, the character says that it takes 60 years to create a human being, and when the human is ready, the only thing she or he can do is to face death. Very pessimistic perspective. There are pages in your books when you experience very similar emotions. You, for example, you summarize your life, 30 years of struggling and writing about inner life to find a balance, and yet again there is a turbulence you have to deal with. In this context, you ask a very interesting question. Is it possible for someone so complicated to meditate, to do yoga? Emmanuel, perhaps for someone who is so complicated, the only solution is literature.
Is literature?
Mm-hmm.
Is what?
The only solution for someone who is so complicated, the only solution is literature.
Well, I think you're right. I think you're right. You sum up the thing. And also, that not also only that, that also, that's the only thing I am good at. Or I don't mean very good, but at least, you know, everyone, that's also the thing of in the gospel, that you have to work with your talents. If you have a talent, well, that's the thing you can and you must develop. and that's the only thing that you can trust also. So, well, I was lucky enough that I have been given some kind, well, some kind of talent, of vocation. There is something that gives some kind of vertebral column, as it can be said, to my life, and it's certainly, even if I try to reach something with yoga, with things, the real thing for me is literature. Sure. That's the only way for me to really to progress, to go somewhere in life. It's the best way to the best approach to death that I can imagine.
What do you think will be the future of what we call a spiritual experience? Will the men of the future still need it?
That's what Malraux used to say. Malraux used to, but I don't know, because there are so many signs of the exact opposite of this, which is that both what is not spiritual, but the religions, some of them are there is a mutation. There is something which is really terrifying. That's not, I am staying, attending every day this trial about jihadism. So, which is a very terrifying, form and deviation of religion. But there are so many signs of this that maybe there is it's a paradoxical sign that something new could happen, on this. But it's I don't know. I believe I don't know what to believe. In fact, about that, I mean.
Emmanuel, thank you for this conversation, for your stories and comments. I wish you could come to Krakow next year,
yes,
for the Conrad Festival, to talk to your Polish readers. The invitation is open.
For next year? Yeah, because this year I go nowhere, but next year with pleasure. But I want to thank you also for your very, very, not only attentive, but smart and creative reading. It's a very good experience for a writer to be read like this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me give one information to our audience. Dear all, next month I will interview Siri Hustvedt, who wrote a book called The Memories of the Future. Well, if there is anybody who has memories of the future, she must be a guest of the Nature of the Future series. Remember the date, last Thursday of December. Be with us, be with Conrad Festival. Emmanuel, thank you again.
Goodbye, Gregory.
Bye-bye.